Good day to each and everyone. My name is Nico N. Bermilio, taking up Bachelor of Secondary Education major in Filipino. So today, I will discuss about human person and value development. But before we dive to our discussion, let me introduce my objectives of my report. So these are my objectives. First, to know what is human person. Second, to know the dimension of the human person. Third, to know the important realities of the human person. And last, to know what are the components of the human person. Then next, let's proceed on what is human person. Human person is the subject of education. He or she is a human person learning and being taught. The human person is also the object of education. He or she is at the center of the curriculum and the entire program. He or she is multidimensional, a distinction between the person and a self and the person in community. The human person is an individual, a self-conscious being of incalculable value in himself or herself. His or her physical, intellectual, moral, spiritual, socio-economic, and political well-being is recognized. So next, these are the different aspects of the human person. The emotional, intellectual, human dignity, physical, moral, spiritual, social, and economical. The first aspect of human person is emotional. Emotional involves the soul and the ego, both of these experiencing stimuli and a spectrum of feelings that range from pain to pleasure. The second aspect is intellectual. It brings together both conscious and unconscious aspects of the mind, which is designed to coordinate physical functions and sustain mental activities by means of logic, reason, knowledge, and belief. The third aspect is human dignity. It's a term used in moral, ethical, legal, and political discussion to signify that a being has an innate right to be valued and receive ethical treatment. The next is physical. It involves firstly the natural world consisting of incorporated matter, and secondly the use of the five physical senses: eyes for sight, ears for sound, nose for smell, taste buds for taste, and nerves for touch and feel. The next is moral. Moral aspects is the differentiation of intentions, decisions, and actions between those that are good or right and those that are bad or wrong. The next is spiritual aspect. Is the breath of life in humanity that is capable of God consciousness and of communication with God, as different from the soul which is self-conscious and the body which is world-conscious. The next is social. Social aspects provide for communication and association between individuals and group. And lastly is the economic. Economical aspect is the way managing limited resources frugally introduces sustainable prosperity. It also focuses on production, distribution, and consumption, and finance and the worth of a team. So those are the aspects of human person. Then next, let's proceed to the important realities of the human person: the self-image, the others, the being, and the I. So next is self-image. So what is self-image? A self-image refers to the person's understanding of himself or herself. So, tandaan po natin yung the word na understanding because it talks about itself. The next, it is responsible in influencing people's way of living. The formation of self-image is derived from two sources. Dalawa po. Ito po yung others and the experiences of the self. So, matatalakay po natin yan later on. The next, there are three kinds of self-image. Number one is the negative self-image delves on limitation rather than asset. So, ano ito? So, negative self-image, it's all about our characteristics. For example, is yung ugali mo na meron ka na wala sa iba at ganun din sa iba na meron sila na wala sa iyo. So, next is overrated self-image. So, yung kanina, negative siya. Ito naman is positive. Stresses on the positive traits. So, sabi ko nga, it is our, or ito yung ugali natin kung mabuti man tayo o hindi. Like, for example, kung mabait ka, masipag ka, ganon. Or, pag sa negative naman is, pangit ugali mo, or tamad ka, ganon. The next is realistic of self-image based on the real self. So, ito naman po, it is of who you are, kung sino ka, we know ourselves internally and externally. So, when we say self-image, it is the totality of human person, being of what or who you are to others and especially to yourself. So, there are three things to consider, which is the negative self-image. Speaking on the negative, and overrated is positive, and realistic is of who you really are. So, let's move on and go to the next. Next is the others. These are person or groups that one consider as important and thus are given the right to influence oneself. Example, your family, friends, classmates, and etc. The next is the being. It is the mainspring or a motivating force in the human person. It is the wellspring or a fountainhead of one's identity, one's essential actions, and one's essential bonds. There are 7 approaches to get in touch with the being. So, what are the approach? So, these are the human person 7 approach to get in touch with the being. Number 1, approach by way of the self-image. Approach by way of important choices. Approach by way of action. Approach by way of what is natural and stressless. Approach by way of people who had the greatest impact on you. Approach to self through severe. And the last is approach by way of deep and not yet fulfilled aspirations. So, mag-focus po muna tayo dyan. So, now let's talk about others. Then, kanina is yung sarili natin, yung self-image. But this one is the others. So, I have here example in the picture. So, nakikita po ba natin? So, here in the picture, we see the example and before there are 2 things and self-image. So, what is that? Which is the self and the other. So, these are the self and this is the others. So, kanina, meron tayong 3 things na nabanggit sa self. Ito yung negative, overrated, and the realistic. So, ito po yan. Yung negative, positive, and then kung sino po tayo. So, in dealing with the other person, there are many ways or what we call the approaches to deal with the people. So, yung approaches po na yon, yung 7 na nabanggit po natin kanina. So, kung makikita po natin yung may mga arrow dyan, yan po yung magiging approach natin or yung approach ng the self to the others. yung approach, the way of self-image, important choices, way of action, by way of what is natural and stressless, and people who had the greatest impact on you, self through severe and not yet fulfilled aspirations. So why we need to learn about this? Because we are living in a diverse culture, in a diverse world. Because sometimes we don't understand the person in front of us. Di ba napapatanong tayo na bakit kaya ganito ganon si mama, si ate? Sometimes we don't understand them, even our classmate. Like that. Lalo na ngayon, online class tayo at hindi tayo nagkikita. Kaya mahirap intindihin yung kapwa natin. But you can never understand the others without understanding ourselves. In order for us to understand others, let us take a look of who we are first. So, naintindihan na po ba natin yung about sa self-image, the others, and the being? So, kung naintindihan po natin, at salamat po sa pakikinig sa example ko, kung malinaw man po o hindi. So, next po is the I. So, what is the I? The I has three different aspects. These are the intellect, the freedom, and the will. So, example po natin dito is the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. So, we will discuss it later on. So, bigyan po natin ng pansin kung ano po ba yung intellect at saka freedom na nabanggit dyan sa meaning ng the I. So, the intellect is the capacity to think on what is good. So, binigyan tayo ng ating Panginoon na mag-isip. Hindi naman tayo na pinanganak sa mundong ito. Nung mga bata pa tayo na marunong agad tayong mag-isip. Natuto tayong mag-isip sa unting-unti nating paglaki. And then, next is the freedom. The freedom is you are free to do what is good. So, hindi natin sinama yung bad kasi magpo-focus tayo sa positive. Yung nasabi natin kanina. So, example po nito yung the story of Adam and Eve in Eden. So, marami po siguro na nakakaalam dito yung kwentong ito. Natatagpuan sa the book of Genesis. Ito po yung nangunguna na libro sa Old Testament. So, meron po ako ditong example na drawing. Pasensya na po kasi ang pangit. So, ito po si Adam, yung malaki. Ito po si Eve, yung maliit. And then, yung puno ng knowledge. May pong diyang bunga. And then, yung ahas, si taning. And then, the question is, who or sino ang may kasalanan dyan? Meron po ba? Sa tingin po ba natin kung sino po yung may kasalanan sa kanila na sana ngayon is free tayo sa lahat ng bagay and then walang tagutom, walang taghiram, but sa nagawa nilang pagkakasala, we suffer the consequences. So, mapapatanong tayo kung sino yung may kasalanan sa kanila. Kasi, meron, ma-apply natin yung mga 7 approaches. So, dito po, ang may kasalanan or maybe the serpent because the serpent tempted Adam and Eve. But the answer is all of them have fault. Why? Because on the first place, there is a rule of God that is said you are free to eat all in the garden except the tree of knowledge. So, mapapaisip po tayo. So, what's the point of this? It means ourself. That intellect was given to us to think what is good or what is the right thing that we should do, and the freedom is given to us to do what is good and avoid what is evil to ourselves and to others. So, malinaw naman po siguro. So, next na po tayo sa last, the sensibility and the body. So, These are the important realities of the human person. So, natakal na natin kanina yan. So, this is very important because whatever action we do, it affects to the other. Hindi natin dapat isipin lamang ang ating sariling kapakanan, kundi isipin din natin kung ano yung makakabuti sa nakararami, lalong-lalo na sa ating community. So, yan lamang po yung 4 na importanteng realities in the human person. So, the next, let's proceed to the components of the human person. So, the first is the being. So, the being, this is the fundamentally positive reality which can be sensed in the very depth of the human person. So, ito na lamang po yung parang pagkakalinaw sa mga tinalakay natin kanina. So, sabi ko kanina, nag-focus tayo sa positive attitude natin or behavior because it reflects the good or yung pagkatao natin kung paano tayo maging mabuti sa ating kapwa. So, the next is the I. This is the reality felt at the level of the head. So, ito po tayo. Ito yung parang mag-aakay sa atin kung ano yung tama. Ito yung magtuturo sa atin ng mga positive na mga bagay, positive na aspeto sa pag-iisip. Yung kumbaga magli-lead sa atin. So, the next is the sensibility. It carries message from the I, from the being, and from the depth and conscience. So, ito po yung pakiramdam na magdadala, o sabi niya dyan, magdadala ng message sa sarili natin. So, papasok po dito yung intellectual natin at saka yung freedom na sinabi ko kanina. Na mayroon tayong kalayaan na mag-isip, binigyan tayo ng kakayahan na mag-isip para gawin yung tama, yung kalayaan natin na hindi para gumawa ng masama. So, the next is the body. It's the biological reality and has its own laws. So, lahat naman tayo merong katawan. So, hindi lingid sa ating sarili yan. And then, ito ay nagagamit natin sa pang-araw-araw nating pamumuhay. Nakadepende ito kung aalagaan nating mabuti. Like for example, hindi tayo magbibisyo, hindi na mga katulad ng sigarilyo, alak, droga, ganon. And then, yung katawan natin is magkakaroon ng syempre magiging healthy siya. So, yan po. And then, the last is in-depth conscience. So, this is the place of the person in the process of growth, a place where what is good can be sensed. So, ito pong last, yung in-depth conscience, kaparehas po siya dun sa natakal natin kanina, yung the sensibility of and the body. So, sabi ko kanina, hindi tayo mabubuhay ng mag-isa lamang. So, kailangan natin yung others. Ito, diba? Ito yung self natin, ito yung others. So, we need each other to mold ourselves, to learn something new, to learn something that improve ourselves, na magiging mabuti tayong tao. So, yan po yon. And then, we have here 2 types of in-depth conscience. So, the first is behavior. It is the manner of conducting oneself. It is a manner in which a person behave. So, ito po yung behavior natin. Kung magiging positive po tayo, yung behavior po natin is magiging payapa po tayo, malinis yung konsensya natin, ganon. But, unlike kung magiging negative tayo sa buhay natin, marami tayong iisipin, makakasama sa ating pag-iisip, maapektuhan yung intellectual natin, and then syempre yung self na pinag-uusapan natin. The next is our attitude. It is a position assumed for a specific purpose. It is an organismic state of readiness to respond in a characteristic way to a stimulus as an object, concept, or situation. Human attitude affects much of a person's behavior, and human behavior depends on the kind environment he or she is interacting with. So, base naman dito, kagaya ng sinabi ko rin kanina, magka-connect po sila, and then ang pinagkaiba nito is kung papaano ka makikitungo sa iba, to the others. Kung ikaw ay, kunwari, for example, nakatira ka sa mga kapitbahay mo, magulo, maiingay. So, yun yung makaka-apekto sa'yo. May apply mo yun sa buhay. But, on the other hand, kung yung mga kapitbahay mo naman is tahimik, maganda yung mga pakikitungo, so, dun mag-i-improve yung mabuti nating pagkatao. So, sana po, naintindihan po natin yung about sa human person and value development. So, maraming salamat po sa pakikinig. Thank you for watching.